Hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In today's MTPredictor video, I'd like to look at how the US E-minis unfolded yesterday, which was the 26th of May. In particular, I'd like to focus on the NQ because we had some very good buy setups a bit later in the day for more experienced users. For standard users who follow the colour of the STF, there was a nice TS3 setup here early in the day. If I place the analysis on, you can see actually that the target was a long way down here. Now when you get a target that's quite so big like this, because it's set up on a very big move beforehand, sometimes it's sensible using closer targets, particularly when the market's moved earlier in the day, therefore the moves later in the day are likely to be less. So for this is where experience comes in and use of the higher time frame chart. So let's go to the 15-minute chart and have a look at how the pivots unfolded during the day. You can see we had a pivot low unfold here. The market then went up to where our TS3 sell was on our 3-minute chart. It then moved down. So you'd have placed a DP on from this prior pivot here. Remember, these are on the chart in advance, so these have been ready as the market goes down. If we now have a look at where this falls, you can see this falls at that level there. So that would be a logical place to have a closer target and would have actually netted a nice 4.5-hour profit, which is very nice indeed. So that's one way slightly more experienced users can use the higher time frame chart, particularly when you've got had big moves earlier in the day and the profit targets are basically so far away they're unachievable within the day. But I want to have a look at, if I clear the analysis off, I'd like to have a look at these buy setups here later in the day. We've already seen that this was our 15-minute DP support. So this DP buy here on our 3-minute chart would have been at higher time frame support. So would have been one that the more experienced members among you would have been looking to consider, even though it's against our red STF. This would have been a buy setup here. It would have taken you in long and then would have stopped you out for a -1 hour loss. It's important to know, understand and accept that all trading strategies will have losses, but we use correct position sizing here that varies the number of lots, contracts or shares to keep those losses small. So that TS3 sell on the way down would have netted plus 4.5R. Then you'd have had a -1 hour loss. In other words, the profit would have been 4.5 times greater than the loss, and that's the way you need to be trading. Big profits and small losses. So that would have been a losing trade. Let's take the analysis off and have a look at what happened a bit later in the day here. Now what you have to be careful of is to see how the market unfolds on the time frame you place the DPs on, because on this 3-minute chart it looks like we're beyond this DP support. Do you see what I mean? It looks like we've gone through the DP support and the DP support is breached. However, this is a 15-minute support. You can see it labeled there. So what we have to be careful of is on the 15-minute chart to see how that looks. If I zoom in, you can see it went through that on the 1500 or 3 o'clock bar, but then snapped back on the 1515 bar, which is this one. In other words, it snapped back into the zone, therefore confirming that support was indeed coming in. I agree it's not an ideal setup because we'd gone slightly below the level, but nevertheless that was confirming support. So how could you use that on the 3-minute chart? Well, you could have then taken this particular buy setup, and I'll show you other reasons why this was a good trade setup to take as well. So let's place the analysis on this trade here. You can see that even though it was a history triangle before, it actually came in and gave you into a long trade, and this next DP buy setup here was a double bottom, so your original trade was never stopped out. That's why it's important to look at your chart and not assume that history triangles are always losing trades. They can be double bottoms or double tops, and therefore there would only be one setup here. That would have had you long into the first target there for plus 3.5-hour profit, which would be nice within itself. However, were there ways to capture a little bit more of this move as the market unfolded later in the day? Well, let's have a look at a couple of other reasons why the more experienced members among you might have wanted to go beyond that first target. As always, we go out to our higher time frame charts. Just bear with us while this loads. There it is. There's our prior pivot high. Right mouse click, place the DP on. Remember, these DPs are on the chart in advance, so they are there ready as leading indicators. that would have been a higher time frame target. Back on the 3-minute chart, how would that looked? You can see that the market would have been beyond the first target and went up to the higher time frame area there. So that would have been one reason why you'd want to let your trade run a bit further. Holding it into the close would have been approximately 8.5 or 8.5 R, so an absolutely massive profit of 8.5 times the initial risk as the market went up there as well. Were there any other reasons? Let's have a look at volume. We always like volume, and you can see that this bar, which was the 1451 bar, was highlighted as our VSA bar on the volume down here, being a red bar. In other words, that made a higher than anticipated volume, pushing below the previous bar's low. In other words, beyond a psychologically important low. The next bar then reversed at DP support, indicating that the higher volume in this bar was not selling, it was actually buying. This is what we call a VSA trade setup, and indicated that the professionals were coming into the market at the 1454 bar, which therefore indicated that the market was likely to move strongly or have a bigger move off this low than normal. So that was another reason why you'd want to hold this long trade a bit further. Let's clear some of this off, clear the analysis off. I also want to look at the Elliott wave pattern going down to this low. If you right mouse click to Elliott wave intermediate, we can see this was also a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Elliott wave 5-wave pattern. So that was a good place for the low of the day to come in as well. But also from this is after a market has gone to the DP for the prior wave 4, which was here. The next level that the market is likely to go to is actually the DP from the start of the sequence, which is back here. And coincidentally, that's exactly where the higher time frame DP resistance is as well. So that was another reason why, when we placed the analysis on this bar here, why you'd want to maybe look to run the market or run your trade, your long trade, a bit further past this initial target here of 3.5 R and try to run it up into the higher time frame resistance area, which is also the DP from the start of the sequence for a 5-wave move, to then increase the profit as well. That all then comes off the back of a very big fall earlier in the day, and so it's very likely that the professionals are likely to take some profits off the short trades early in the day and therefore move the market up. But can you see how the tools in MTPredictor can not only help you anticipate where the low was coming in, which was this higher time frame 15-minute DP support, but also anticipate where the market's going to go to, which again was the higher time frame target, can give you your minor pattern there, and from that you know that the market, if it goes beyond this DP from the wave 4, is then likely to go to the DP for the start of the sequences up here. Tie that all together with the VSA bar and 1451 on the volume here, indicating that professionals are stepping in and like to move the market higher. It can then give you confidence to hold this long trade for, let's say, an absolutely massive 8.6R profit. So hopefully that's been a good example of how, with experience and showing you how to interpret what the market's doing, you can use the tools in MTPredictor to uncover some great trades. And this is basically what we teach in our training webinars, is how to get the most from the MTPredictor tools and uncover some good trades like this. Remember, MTPredictor is not just an automatic trade system, just clear everything off, where you just simply follow the automatic trade setups and that's it. With a little bit of understanding from our training, you can then get a greater understanding of how the markets are likely to move, particularly what the professionals are doing, and as such uncover some great trade setups like this long trade off what was pretty much the low of the day, to then come out with a very, very good 8.5R profit. That is what MTPredictor is all about, having trades where the profits are much larger than the initial risks. That is professional trading.